I think when people start thinking of like the virtual economy, it's kind of open to everybody, access friendly, and everybody's more or less on the same playing field when you start, compared to say the real economy, where there's one of the kind of major trending words for decades now has been inequality, right? We have
Right.
we have the 1%, and then you have kind of everybody else. I would assume that when people start thinking about the virtual economy, that doesn't necessarily transfer into the virtual economy. Have you seen that, or is that incorrect? Is there real inequality in the virtual economy right now?
What we found in our research is that the virtual economy can help address some of that generational
Mm,
inequality. Um, because it is mainly young people entering the space, and because the barriers of entry as an entrepreneur are much lower. If you're building a virtual business, you don't need that capital to invest in hiring
yeah.
employees and paying rent, and you can scale very rapidly. So you see young people that are making tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars uh, doing these completely new industries, actually inventing their own jobs. And I'm happy to talk about this more in depth, because we often talk about automation as a job removal tool.
Yeah.
And the virtual economy can actually come here and bring in a whole new ecosystem of jobs that just didn't exist only a few years ago, or are currently being invented. And they're actually generating real revenue. And the problem here is that financial institutions or banks don't know how to recognize that revenue as income.
Mm,
So you see these young people making all of this money, but the banks don't understand how sustainable that revenue is. So if you go want to get a mortgage and you're a streamer and you made $200,000 in 2020, they're like, okay, you have 200K, but how do we know that this is sustainable income? For them, it's more of
right.
a hobby, right?
Right.
So
Right.
it's hard for you to grow your business to get a business loan or to get a mortgage or these kind of long-term planning products. And that is hopefully going to shift as these jobs become more and more commonplace.
That's really interesting. And then maybe more relevantly to the work that you guys do at L'Atelier, can you touch on that, as I think maybe what you're discussing now is highly tied to what is actually being done at your organization.
Um, within the company, we've done a lot of research not only on technology but also on how people interact with this technology, and for example, what kind of jobs are being created.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
we've cataloged approximately 20 of the most common jobs, and we find that individually they take, of course, place online, and they can generate income from a few thousand to millions. So we often think about it as like the gig economy, but it's gone way
Yeah.
beyond that.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
actual income, primary income generating jobs. We've spoken to people who have made millions of dollars playing esports. We've talked to a young lady who's buying a house based on her Twitch streaming business. These are real jobs, and we kind of ignore them. But there's more niche jobs that actually generate a lot of money also. For example, farmers. Farmers are people that uh, farm and sell valuable in-game items.
Hmm.
And that has actually a geopolitical point here, because people in Venezuela started farming in-game currency in RuneScape. And then they could earn $40 a month in a place where the average wage is $7.50 a month.
Right. Right.
So see, it kind of shifts these types of like inequality dynamics by opening up a new market in new localities and in new currencies that allow you to bypass the limitations of the real world.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I first actually heard of mining, and maybe my first interaction with the virtual economy was ages ago, when I had a
Mm-hmm.
friend who was actually playing World of Warcraft, and he was telling me
Mm-hmm.
about, I believe there were Chinese miners mining gold that would then be able to be sold to the players for actual real currency, and that, yeah, those Chinese miners were making 5, 10, maybe even sometimes 100 times their normal going rate, or their normal wages in the smaller counties that they were working in China. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Absolutely. And it's, this is a lot of repetitive job that sometimes
Hmm.
is done by bots or scripts. But what's fascinating is that we're seeing more high level jobs enter the virtual economy. Think about digital asset creators. Again, we saw
Hmm.
this in Second Life where people designed shoes and made $1 million a year. But now we're seeing this at a much greater scale, like because you can build entire digital assets for virtual worlds. We're seeing digital architects, digital real estate agents,
Hmm.
business consultants, conflict mediators. And we found that some of them earn up to $120,000 a year through direct sales and commission. There's also people who mod games, right? Or who create worlds within
Mm.
worlds.
Mm.
And these also make a lot of money, usually through Patreon donations or other donation based business models. So this is a diversification of quote unquote labor, and the low barriers of entry is giving a lot of benefits to younger people who are,
Hmm.
there's less competition for these jobs, and the years of experience don't really matter. Like you can have 6 months experience, that's fine because the job has existed for 6 months,
Right,
right?
right,
You
right.
don't need to be a 45-year-old, usually white man in order to get to a position of leadership in your enterprise. You can be a 17-year-old quote unquote nerd and be a respected business person and generate real revenue
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
start your career basically in the virtual economy.
So you're talking about barriers to entry. I would assume
Hmm.
that, so of course, yes, the barriers to entry are significantly lower, but
Hmm.
maybe in another sense, they might be a little bit higher, right? If you're talking about many of the people that are working in the virtual economy, that are creating these jobs in the virtual economy, they would have to be kind of tech savvy, young people, kind of the digital literate generation, if you will. Um, do you see that as maybe a barrier to entry for, say, people that aren't, like, for instance, like my parents, not very digitally literate, don't necessarily know how to do anything on the internet besides kind of basic internet searches and email? Is that kind of a new barrier to entry in a new economy that's emerging?
In some ways, but you
Hmm.
have to remember that as the technology evolves, the user base will expand.
Hmm. Hmm.
As I mentioned, because there is demand and there's money in this field, there's a lot of services that are being built to simplify this process. Every technology experiences a phase where advanced users will have a first mover advantage.
Yeah.
It's kind of by design. It's actually kind of good because the more tech savvy people can build the infrastructure for other people to enter and create this kind of, growth that would be hard to do. If you have too many people entering an immature space, that immature space can collapse. We've seen
Right.
that with
Right.
crypto, right? Like
Hmm.
when people rushed to Bitcoin, the blockchain couldn't keep up with the demand and the costs increased and it just kind of crashed.
Yeah.
But as we developed side chains and other technologies that enable a higher volume of transactions, now we're seeing more sustained growth and more sustained economic development.
Yeah.
Without going to blockchain, think of the smartphone or think of online banking, right? Online banking also took a long time for people to trust it. Wow, I'm going to see all of my money on a computer screen. Like that's kind of scary and
Yeah.
terrifying for someone who was used to wearing a suit to go to the bank every
Sure. Sure.
Saturday
Sure.
morning, right? So it's kind of a normal phenomenon. It doesn't scare me. But yes, the virtual economy caters mainly to younger people. But we're seeing strong evidence that it can bridge generational income gaps, and this is what we should be focusing on really. It's
Hmm.
it's like the fact that there's less competition, and less demand for years of experience, less demand for traditional degrees. You don't have to get $100,000 of student debt in order to enter these like well-paying jobs, and
Right.
they cross
Right.
geographies as we saw with
Yeah.
Venezuela. So
Yeah.
like yes, there are barriers to entry because it's complicated, but there's also many other factors that make it a lot easier and a lot more equal
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
some ways. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Okay. Understood. Um,